Everything you learned about trees is wrong, and the truth is far more unbelievable than most science textbooks ever explained. Because the giant oak standing in a field, the tall pine in a mountain forest, and the wooden table inside your home were not built from the soil beneath them, even though that is what almost everyone assumes from childhood. And that single misunderstanding hides one of the most powerful and fascinating secrets in biology. You think trees grow from the ground. They don't. In fact, most of a tree does not come from the ground at all. And once this becomes clear, the world outside your window will look completely different, because forests will no longer be collections of plants rooted in dirt, but massive structures built from thin air. Yes, air. The invisible gas all around us is the true source of most of the solid wood in a tree trunk. And this is not a metaphor or poetic exaggeration. It is measurable science, backed by experiments that shocked even early scientists who first tested it. For centuries, people believed soil was the main ingredient of a tree's body because it seems logical. Roots sit in dirt, trees need nutrients, water flows through the ground, and when farmers enrich soil, plants grow better. So the conclusion appeared obvious. The soil must be turning into wood, bark, branches, and leaves. But that conclusion is wrong, and the correction rewrites how we understand life on Earth. In this video, you are going to learn where the real mass of a tree comes from, what role sunlight plays in building solid matter, how invisible carbon in the air becomes heavy wood you can touch, and why a simple experiment hundreds of years ago quietly exposed the truth in a way that still surprises scientists today. You will also discover why soil, while essential, contributes only a tiny fraction to a tree's actual weight, and why this fact connects trees directly to climate change, the air you breathe, and even your own body. By the end, you will understand how forests are actually vast storage systems for atmospheric carbon, how every wooden object around you was once part of the sky, and why the idea that trees grow from the ground is one of the most common scientific misconceptions people carry without ever questioning it. There is a reason this topic matters far beyond basic biology class, because once you realize that trees are built mostly from carbon dioxide, you begin to see the planet differently. You see that air is not empty space, but raw material for life. You see that sunlight is not just warmth, but construction energy. And you see that the ground beneath a tree is more of a support system than a source of mass. The truth is dramatic in its simplicity. Trees take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, split it apart using energy from the sun, combine that carbon with water, and slowly assemble cellulose, lignin, and all the complex molecules that create trunks thick enough to stand for centuries. And this process happens quietly, leaf by leaf, cell by cell, until thin, invisible gas becomes towering wood, strong enough to hold nests, withstand storms, and shape entire ecosystems. This means that when a tree grows larger, it is not swallowing soil, it is pulling carbon from the air and locking it into solid form. And that single fact explains why cutting forests releases carbon back into the atmosphere, why reforestation matters in fighting climate change, and why ancient forests represent centuries of stored atmospheric history. The deeper you look, the more astonishing it becomes, because even your own body contains carbon atoms that were once part of ancient plants, which themselves pulled that carbon from the air long before humans existed. And this endless recycling connects every living thing through the atmosphere in ways most people never fully realize. Stay with this video until the end, because we will break down the exact percentages of where a tree's mass really comes from, explain the historical experiment that proved soil barely changes weight even after years of tree growth, reveal the chemistry happening inside every green leaf, and show why this knowledge shifts our understanding of nature from simple observation to profound insight. By the time we finish, you will not just know a cool scientific fact, you will understand one of the most elegant systems on Earth. A system where light becomes structure, air becomes matter, and life literally builds itself out of what seems like nothing. And once you see a forest as solidified atmosphere shaped by sunlight, it becomes impossible to unsee it. If you enjoy discovering truths that challenge what you thought you knew and uncover the hidden science behind everyday life, this channel is for you. We explore powerful ideas, forgotten experiments, and surprising facts that change how you see the world. Make sure you subscribe and join us, because the deeper you look at reality, the more extraordinary it becomes. And this is only the beginning. Roots disappear into the soil, and that picture feels like proof. We water plants, and they grow taller. We add fertilizer, and leaves become greener. Soil looks dark and rich, full of nutrients. So the idea forms naturally in the mind. Trees must be built from the ground. The trunk rises from it. The roots drink from it. The earth seems like the source of everything solid in a forest. This belief feels logical. It feels obvious. A seed goes into dirt, and later a tree stands in that same spot. Dirt must have turned into wood. That is the simple story most people accept without question. Soil equals tree mass. The reasoning seems clean and direct. But logic can be misleading when the full process is hidden from sight. The roots are visible when exposed. The ground is tangible. Air, on the other hand, feels empty. It feels weightless. Nothing about air suggests that it can become thick bark or heavy branches. So the mind chooses the visible explanation. The ground must be feeding the bulk of the tree. This assumption settles in early and rarely gets challenged. Yet this clean conclusion hides a deeper truth waiting underneath it. And once the question is asked clearly, the old belief starts to shake. If trees do not grow from the ground in the way we think, then where does all that mass truly come from? Where does the weight of a massive trunk originate? Where do the tons of wood inside a forest begin? The soil seems too obvious an answer, and that is exactly why it needs to be questioned. Because when the numbers are examined and the chemistry is understood, the ground beneath a tree plays a very different role than most people imagine. The real source is above, not below. Trees grow mostly from the air. That statement sounds strange at first. Air feels like nothing, yet air contains carbon dioxide, a gas made of carbon and oxygen. Carbon is not nothing. Carbon is a building block of life. Inside every leaf, a quiet chemical process unfolds every second the sun shines. This process is called photosynthesis. Sunlight hits the leaf. The leaf captures that energy. Water travels up from the roots. Carbon dioxide enters through tiny openings in the leaves. Then something remarkable happens. The tree uses energy from sunlight to split carbon dioxide. It separates the carbon from the oxygen. The oxygen is released back into the air. The carbon stays. That carbon becomes the backbone of sugars. Those sugars are transformed into cellulose and lignin. Those molecules stack and bond and form the solid structure of wood. Step by step, atom by atom, invisible gas becomes solid matter. Air has carbon. Trees take that carbon from carbon dioxide. They break it apart using sunlight. They build their body from that carbon. A tree is mostly made of air. That line sounds poetic, but it is chemical fact. The trunk, the branches, the fibers, the rings marking each year of growth are built largely from carbon atoms that once floated freely in the atmosphere. This idea was not always understood. Centuries ago, a scientist named Jan Baptist van Helmont decided to test where a tree's mass truly came from. He planted a small willow tree in a pot filled with carefully weighed soil. He measured the soil weight before planting. Then he watered the tree and let it grow for years. After 5 years, the tree had gained a significant amount of weight. It was much larger and heavier. Then he dried and weighed the soil again. The soil had barely changed in mass. The difference was tiny compared to the large increase in the tree's weight. The numbers did not match the common belief. If soil were turning into wood, the soil weight should have dropped dramatically. It did not. The mass had to come from somewhere else. Van Helmont concluded that the increase did not come from the soil. He did not fully understand carbon dioxide at the time, but his experiment cracked open the door. The ground was not the main source of the tree's substance. That simple pot experiment still stands as one of the clearest demonstrations of this truth. Soil does matter, but not in the way people think. Soil provides minerals: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, iron. These elements are essential. Without them, the tree cannot function properly. Leaves turn yellow without certain nutrients. Growth slows. The tree becomes weak. But minerals make up only a small fraction of the total mass. They act like vitamins in a human diet, necessary, powerful, but not the bulk of the body. The difference between nutrients and structural mass is critical. Nutrients enable processes. Structural mass forms the body. The heavy wood that makes up most of a tree is not built primarily from minerals in the soil. It is built from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Around 95% of a tree's dry mass comes from these three elements. Carbon and oxygen come largely from carbon dioxide in the air. Hydrogen comes from water absorbed through the roots. Water itself contributes mass, but the carbon from the air forms the backbone of organic molecules. This means that most of the solid structure of a tree originates in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide enters the leaf. Sunlight powers the reaction. Water supplies hydrogen. The tree assembles glucose. Glucose becomes cellulose. Cellulose forms the cell walls that give wood its strength. Over time, layer upon layer builds up. Growth rings mark the years. Each ring represents carbon captured from the sky. Trees are built from sunlight, air, and water. The soil supports them. It anchors roots. It supplies minerals, but it does not supply the bulk of their weight. When a forest grows denser, it is not because the ground is shrinking. It is because carbon dioxide is being pulled from the atmosphere and locked into wood. Forests are solidified air. The wooden table in a home was once carbon dioxide drifting in the wind. The paper in a book was once part of the sky. Even the carbon in the human body once cycled through plants that pulled it from the air. Every breath contains carbon dioxide exhaled by living beings. Trees inhale that gas in their own way. They reshape it into form. They turn invisibility into structure. The exchange is constant and quiet. Oxygen flows out, carbon flows in. The cycle repeats every day sunlight touches a leaf. What appears to be simple growth from soil is actually a grand atmospheric transformation powered by light. When seen from this angle, a forest is not just a collection of rooted organisms. It is a vast system capturing carbon, reshaping it, storing it in trunks that can stand for centuries. The heavy beams in old buildings represent decades of captured air. Each board carries a history of sunlight absorbed and carbon fixed. The ground below those trees held them upright and fed them trace minerals, but the sky above provided the primary substance. This reframes the entire image of growth. Growth is not dirt turning into wood. Growth is gas becoming life. Carbon dioxide, often viewed only as a pollutant, is also raw material for structure. Without it, no tree could form a trunk. Without sunlight, the reaction would stall. Without water, hydrogen would be missing. The process requires all three, yet the atmosphere plays the central role in supplying carbon. Once this becomes clear, the common belief fades. Soil equals support and nutrients. Air equals mass. The shift in perspective is subtle but powerful. It changes how forests are understood in discussions about climate and carbon cycles. It changes how wooden objects are perceived. It changes how a simple tree is seen when standing beneath its branches. The mass, towering overhead, did not rise from dirt in the way most imagine. It rose from countless molecules of carbon dioxide drawn from the air and stitched together by sunlight into the architecture of life. We are walking, breathing, recycled air turned into life. So no, trees don't grow from the ground. The roots anchor them. The soil feeds them minerals. But the real story is far bigger than dirt and roots. The true source of their mass floats above them every single day. They grow from the sky, from invisible carbon drifting through the air, from sunlight pouring down in silence, from water rising through hidden channels inside the trunk. What looks like simple growth from the earth is actually a quiet transformation of atmosphere into structure. Every ring inside a tree trunk is a record of captured air. Every branch is frozen sunlight. Every forest is a monument built from molecules that once moved freely across the planet. And that changes everything. It means the heavy wood in a house was once part of the open sky. It means paper, furniture, even the oxygen you breathe are all connected in a cycle that never stops. It means when you walk through a forest, you are surrounded by air that has been reshaped into towering columns of life. The ground holds the tree steady, but the sky builds it. Next time you see a forest, pause for a second and remember what you are really looking at. You are looking at air made solid. If this changed the way you see the world, make sure you like this video so more people can discover it. Share it with someone who loves nature or science. And subscribe to this channel for more deep insights that challenge what you think you know. Because the world is far more incredible than it first appears, and we are just getting started.